Michael. Michael.
If I may have everyone's attention for a moment, please. As the service will be commencing shortly, I'm going to ask that everyone present in possession of a cellular or electronic device, if you would kindly silence it or turn it off at this time. We are looking for two pallbearers that we're unaware if they're here or not. Would Danny or Maurice be present at this time?
Funeral service for Harry Schachter. I'll start by reciting the first chapter from the book of Psalms in the Hebrew. Ashrei ha'ish asher lo halach be'etzat risha'im u'v'derech chatzaim lo amad u'v'moshav leitzim lo yashav ki im b'torat azna chevtzo u'v'tordo yegeh yomam v'layla v'yakhet shash al pagim mar asher priyo yitzem b'to v'leilo yibol v'chol asher yaseh yatzliach lochein harsham ki im kamot asher titfeni ruach al kein la kumu rashim b'mashpat v'chatzim b'adat tzadikim ki yoder na derech tzadikim v'derech rishaim tzoved. We will now hear words of tribute from Aviva.
Thank you, everyone, for being here. Dr. Harry Schachter, MD, PhD, recipient of the Jerningham Gold Medal, Fellow of the Royal Society of Canada, Cody Medalist, Star Medalist, Austrian Cross of Honor for Science and Art, Rosalind Kornfeld Award for Lifetime Achievement in Glycobiology, Senior Scientist Emeritus. My dad, Harry, my dad. I have always been so very, very proud of you, Dad. How do you describe a person who you have so much love and admiration for, who was a giant in his field, who was always happy to help anyone who needed it and couldn't pass by a homeless person without digging into his wallet for something to give them? Someone who fellow scientists admired because of his integrity and his sheer brilliance. Someone who was always himself, take it or leave it. Everyone took it. If you met my father, you loved him. It was just that simple. His singing voice gave you a window into his soul. He loved Frank Sinatra, but when he sang Yiddish Amame or Some Enchanted Evening, everyone went silent. Yiddish Amame was my personal favorite. His voice had such depth and warmth. It was compassion and love and empathy. It was all of the things he always had difficulty expressing in words. He was by nature an introvert, really, and preferred to be at his computer or in his lab solving problems as opposed to actually speaking to people. Most people never knew this. I would often be asked if my dad was as exciting and animated as at home as he was in a lecture hall or at a party. No, he wasn't. No. Yeah, no. At parties, his booming voice was unmistakable. Watching my dad dancing to a calypso beat in the middle of a dance floor, hands in the air, feet moving to the rhythm, is one of my fondest memories of him. Harry has arrived, now the fun can start, was a common refrain. He was an outstanding grandfather. First came Adam. Adam and my dad had a special bond. Adam soaked in all of the information that my dad had in his head, information about science, geography, astronomy, history, literature, archaeology, stamps, and opera. Music was what joined them most closely. They began singing together when Adam was very young and continued up until recently when my dad was already suffering from dementia. Adam took all of my dad's passions and interests and all of the music they had played together and gently placed it all back within my dad's grasp with the same kindness and patience that my dad had shown him. My dad's most prized possession was his brain, and when he started to notice that his memory was faltering, it was very frightening and painful for him. He was so strong in body and soul that he fought on courageously for the following 9 years. You were right, Dad. The brain really is the final frontier. Humility, another theme in my dad's life. When he was honored in any way, his first instinct was to suggest the name of someone else who he felt was more deserving. He was never that impressed with his own brilliance, but everyone else always saw it, so he didn't have to. He taught us to be humble, to never be advertisements of our own successes. This lesson might have been a little too well taught. Yeah, but my brother and I turned out okay nonetheless. Thanks, Dad. My father loved Noah and shared Noah's interest in horror movies and filming, always the willing participant as actor or grip or sound man during Noah's famous films that were created at Bayview Wildwood. Resort Ran Dumb and its sequel, Resort Ran Dumber. They were good. He loved Sarah too, teaming up with her on many competitive events at Bayview Wildwood every summer. Most notable, the table decorating competition, which they extended to the decoration of the actual dinner guests. We were all instructed to appear in many zany and ridiculous costumes on table judging night following their careful planning for this event. We won each year, to their great delight. He loved Audrey too. Her zest and zeal for life mirrored his own. He had a willing companion for every new experience. Mom and Dad gave us 20 years of togetherness at Bayview Wildwood. The grandkids formed everlasting bonds there. My dad could be counted on to participate in every bocce ball tournament, horseshoe tournament, campfire, and karaoke night. Every morning, the Bayview newspaper would come out with a list of the day's activities. My dad would read it aloud at the breakfast table. Who's going with me to the critter show? Who wants to see the magician tonight? It was an amazing time for all of us to share in the magic of summer and in the wonder that my dad brought to everything. My dad was born in Vienna, Austria, and at the age of 5, from the window of his house on Wallensteinstrasse, he watched the Third Reich march down his street. He never forgot this. He was one of the lucky ones who escaped by boat in 1938 to Trinidad, where he was able to survive the war. There, he picked up his love for the warm blue waters of the Caribbean, as well as his characteristic West Indian accent. He was taught by Jesuit priests who were always kind to him and who he had the utmost respect for. My dad won the Island Scholarship for being the highest achieving academic student on the island. The money that he won with this scholarship helped to propel him to Toronto to begin his life and career here. My parents met in Toronto in 1958. They were partners for life. They traveled extensively, mostly for conferences where my dad was guest lecturer. Sometimes we got to go along too, not always. They sailed together on our Shark and with our wonderful cousins, the Kornhausers, at the Island Yacht Club. They surrounded themselves with a large group of exceptional and dedicated friends. My parents loved each other deeply. My mom has been holding my dad's hand and caring for him throughout his life, including during these last several difficult years. She did it with love and dignity. I want to thank my dad's exceptional caregivers, Gina, Jomo, and Shamika. We are grateful to have had you supporting and caring for my dad. I also want to thank my husband, Paul. My dad thought the world of Paul. Look how fit he is. Can you do that? No, I can't. Not even close. No. They too shared the common interest of music, singing happily together long into the night at many family dinners. Paul, you have been a wonderful son-in-law. You cared for my dad with all your heart, and he loved you with all of his. I couldn't have done this without you. We all loved you so much, Dad. I love you so much. You were an outstanding role model. We will miss you every day, and we will carry you with us wherever we go. We will never forget the tremendous gifts and experiences that you brought to our lives.
We'll now hear from Asher.
Dad would have both recoiled at this and simultaneously loved this. First, the recoil. All right, enough already. Come on. No, that's stop already. Too much. Okay, let's go. Let's go was a key word for him. He didn't like being the center of attention. He was ever humble, despite his vast successes. It was not false modesty. He also made sure that Aviva and I didn't get a swollen head, as he would put it. He was always up for administering a gentle, good-hearted reminder to be proud of our accomplishments, but with a healthy dose of humility and respect for others, because none of us achieves success alone. But he also would have loved this, reminiscing about the many joyous moments, laughing, singing, kibitzing with his grandchildren. You know, I feel like I should really have slides and a laser pointer to really capture the essence of my dad. There's the... and he was a gifted and animated teacher. I was very lucky and privileged to be in his biochemistry class in first-year medical school and to experience his teaching style firsthand. There was a section on biochemistry, the biochemistry of hormones and the reproductive system. So one lecture he came in and he said, today we're going to talk about my 3 favorite things: salt, sugar, and sex. Later on, in that same lecture, he said, what am I? I'm a uterus. Everyone passed anatomy that year. When he had the lecture on the DNA double helix, he started by discussing Rosalind Franklin's contribution. Rosalind Franklin was a key contributor to the data that enabled Watson and Crick to describe the double helix, the DNA structure. And they won the Nobel Prize. She unfortunately passed away before then, but they never quite gave her that credit. And he wanted to point out to all 252 medical students there, I think over half of the class was still male at that point, that there are other contributors to this wonderful discovery. He also wanted to make sure that we understood the true structure of the DNA double helix. And so just describing it wasn't enough, so he created the DNA double helix dance, and he would go like this. Goes down like that. Everyone passed genetics. Being a medical student at University of Toronto and then a pediatric resident at Hospital for Sick Children during his long tenure was indeed a privilege, but it was also somewhat of a burden. I had a genetics and metabolics rotation during my pediatric residency at Sick Kids. And at the end of that rotation, the attending physician was to give me feedback. And he said, you know, you're a nice guy, but you lack your dad's understanding of biochemistry. And so I tried to think of, you know, how can I explain this to him in terms that he'll understand? And so I thought, you know, a PhD in biochemistry is not an autosomal dominant inherited trait. One of the senior medical school faculty once asked me whether I was going to go into research like my dad. When I told him I was leaning more towards clinical work, his smile faded, and he said, "That's a shame." In those 3 words, he was telling me that we need more Harry Schachter in the world. Dad's passion for science was explicit, but his implicitly charitable and caring nature underscored his philosophy that we must each strive to do our personal best, to understand and solve the most important problems that limit our joy of life. We must each strive to do our personal best. And all who trained and worked in his lab experienced his steadfast exemplification of this philosophy. Despite building a reputation as a world-class scientist, over the almost half-century at U of T and HSC, he kept his lab small so he could fully commit to enabling each and every one of the budding scientists in his lab to each achieve their personal best, building collaboration and camaraderie rather than cutthroat competition. Expanding his vision beyond his lab, Professor Schachter and his team published quality over quantity. He didn't publish as many papers as some of the larger labs, but his publications went to the best journals and were eagerly read by all in the field. His renown and influence was pervasive. They're just to give 2 of the countless karmic examples I've experienced. We were at one of the conferences in Prague where he was invited guest lecturer. This is 1988. We were on the subway, my mother, my sister, and I, and we had our name tags on. And this woman gingerly walked up to us and said, "Excuse me, are you related," and I quote, "to the great Harry Schachter?" We were very happy to admit that we were. And my dad maintained contact with her for many years as well. She was a Romanian scientist. More recently, and this is about a year ago, a colleague of mine at where I work now arranged to have a discussion with a scientist at Harvard about one of the programs we were working on. And we had a video meeting. We had a great discussion. During the introduction, he introduced himself as a biochemist, glycobiologist, and having done work in carbohydrate-deficient glycoprotein syndrome. That's the largest word I'm going to say today. CDGS, which is something that my dad worked on. And so after the meeting, I emailed him separately, and I asked him if he'd ever come across my father. And this is what he wrote. "Dear Asher, I wondered about that today. Your father's one of my heroes, a legend. He helped create this whole area of glycobiology. So please say hello for me and tell him that I think of him often. Really miss seeing him, talking to him, and his wonderful personality and enthusiasm. He's very missed by us all. He was admired and revered for his incisive mind. Science was his obsession." This is me reading now. That was the end of the email. Science was his obsession, his passion, and his religion. He did not tolerate deviation from the scientific method as the only path to find and define truth. He guided others via incisive questioning, revealing paradoxes, contradictions, and gaps in logic. This was so ingrained in my dad's essence that he could do it in his sleep, sometimes literally. He had invited a guest lecturer to the medical school. He introduced this lecturer. He sat down in the front row, and as the lecture began, he promptly fell asleep and snored loudly the whole time. At the end of the lecture, during the question period, he asked 4 pointed, incisive questions. It's a true story. My meandering early career path troubled him. He couldn't fully hide his pride when I was accepted to medical school, in part because he was likely still worried that I was heading for a lackluster career as a reggae bass player. But prior to that day that I was accepted to medical school, he would often fold his arms, concerningly look me straight in the eye and ask, "Can you make a living at that?" And yet when my band launched into Calypso favorite Hot, Hot, Hot at the Bamboo Club on Queen Street, The crowd gave him a wide berth as he showcased his Trinidadian-infused gyrations. Years later, he would have a permanent beaming smile at every jam at the Eisen House, especially when one of my oldest friends, Daniel Rothstein, sat in on drums, beaming as he played, as he always does, and my dad beaming back in awe as he fed off of Dan's joy. Yes, Dad loved music. This was apparent to anyone who heard him sing, whether it was Broadway tunes, Yiddish songs, or Sinatra. And yes, Dad definitely did it his way. He also loved to explore. He bought a sailboat in 1972 and got me into sailing. I enjoyed sailing well into my teens. He learned downhill skiing in his 40s and got us skiing. And just a few years in, he took me skiing in the Banff Rockies, at a conference, of course. Aviva and I got to travel with my parents to many fascinating destinations when my dad attended these conferences. He was a Renaissance man, extensive knowledge about history, nature, geography, cultures, art, literature. He wanted Aviva and me to have a range of interests and activities to enrich our lives and ensure we were well-rounded. We also witnessed his ingrained concern for and generosity towards those who were down and out, suffering and vulnerable, perhaps because he lost his father, who I'm named after, when he was a teenager. My mother often ponders in amazement how Dad managed to not just survive, but thrive following that trauma. His approach to challenges could be best described as informed, logical, and incisive to find the best and direct solution. At times, this gave him the appearance of a pessimist, but in fact, he was a realist. When confronted with a challenge that he knew was beyond his control, he would let it be. Okay, never mind, calm down. He actually said calm down. He said the L. Calm down. No point in getting all worked up. That is until it was his mind itself that was under attack. That was a battle he fought vigorously, vehemently, and valiantly. All of us who were touched by his character have ingrained part of him into who we are. And as I'm also blessed with his genes, I see daily reminders to do my personal best to embody his generous and honest spirit. When I look in the mirror, I see a glimpse of his eyes, sometimes with that slightly rascalish, goofy, kibitzing twinkle, and he could always summon a piercing stare that saw through falsehoods. When I have intense discussions, I hear his exuberant tenor of a voice. With a not-so-subtle remnant of that Trinidadian accent, he could passionately state a point and question paradoxes and contradictions. And when I'm confronted with a difficult ethical conundrum, I feel his crystal-clear integrity and logic guide me to choose the right path over the easier one. What a wonderful legacy he's installed in all of us who were touched by his light and his life.
We'll now hear from Adam, Noah, Sarah, and Audrey.
The four of us had so many shared memories with Grandpa. From our stays at Bayview Wildwood, which is a resort in Muskoka that we would stay at for a week every summer for 18 consecutive years, to various vacations and hanging out at their place on Shabbat evenings. We all had many wonderful experiences together with Grandpa, but he also touched each of us in individual ways. Grandpa's joy for life and deep love for family and friends touched everyone around him. He contributed so much to the world of biochemistry and was greatly respected by all who worked with him. I'm forever proud of him for his accomplishments. But in addition to being an incredible scientist, I knew him as a loving grandfather who never failed to make us smile and was always young at heart. One memory that sticks out to me as I reflect on the many wonderful memories that he gifted us was when he and my grandma, my parents, and Noah went to the 4th of July parade when I was 7. A float passed us by playing calypso music, and I look over at Grandpa and he's dancing away doing the calypso, which was a frequent activity for him. The pure joy on his face as he was dancing will always encourage me to find the fun in anything I do. He had a youthfulness that never seemed to diminish. He taught me how to stay young no matter how old I am. He had a joyous smile and warm presence, and I will forever be grateful for the love that he showed all of us.
Grandpa's warmth followed him into the spaces that he entered. I always loved being in his office. It was a space as intellectual as it was playful. The shelves held many curiosities. A human skull, a piece of fossilized coral, a Newton's cradle, and books and magazines on all topics. His exercise bike was in the corner, and peering out the window was his white telescope. His office also contained many things that were just for his grandchildren. There were interactive science books with DIY activities and educational CD-ROMs about everything from archaeology to zoology. Grandpa was always sharing his knowledge with us, and his office was a repository of that knowledge. His essence colored every part of it. That office was in a house that now belongs to new owners, who will fill it with their own stories. But that space will always have special meaning to me as the location of many cherished memories. Grandpa was equally capable of being scientific and silly in the best ways possible. Whether he was explaining the probability of alien life existing somewhere in the universe, or playing the voice of an evil robot in a comedy skit with his grandkids, he approached everything with a childlike enthusiasm. Grandpa inspired me to always be curious about the world and to carry a sense of playfulness with that curiosity.
I know I can speak for all four of us that many of our best memories were during our one special week every summer at Bayview Wildwood. It was thanks to my grandparents that we were all able to become so close, despite living in different countries. My grandpa made a special effort every year to bring something new that we could all share in together, whether that be heading to the dock to look at the planets with his telescope, or sitting on the couch on a rainy day watching some of his favorite movies. He had a way of bringing the world to life. He cherished being able to share his many interests and passions with the people he loved. Among his many wonderful qualities, his brilliance, his joy, his curiosity, one that stands out to me was his kindness. My grandpa had to attend every show at Bayview Wildwood, just in case nobody else showed up, so the performers wouldn't feel badly. He was always thinking of others and wanting to help, not just because it seemed like the right thing to do, but because it seemed to him the only logical choice. And he was an endlessly good sport, as we made him record take after take of our nonsensical skits. I'm so grateful for the love of science and curiosity that my grandfather instilled in me, and for the many cherished memories that we all have together.
For a large part of my life, which I am deeply fortunate and grateful for, I would stay over at my grandparents' house after Shabbat dinner. And on Saturday mornings, Grandpa would tell me about math, science, and history, and then we'd sing some music together. And no matter the setting, Grandpa always had a way of channeling a profound sense of awe. And he delighted in sharing that sense of awe with the people around him. In our Saturday morning lessons, he emanated a sense of wonder about the world. He would be telling me about 20-sided shapes or the theory of evolution, and his eyes would light up, his whole spirit energized. It was as if he was saying, "Isn't it incredible? Isn't it beautiful? that the world is this way and we can understand it. As we look together through a telescope into the depths of the universe, he would gently nudge me to appreciate its vastness, the inconceivable scale of nothingness that's out there. He wanted me to be fully aware of what an incredible miracle it is that I am alive, that I am on the one tiny planet on which we can have the experience of life. His state was always one of amazement and humility, simultaneous awe at the natural world, as well as gratitude for being able to study it and understand it. In the world of music, he marveled at the often indescribable emotion that music can elicit. We would be listening to Bruce Springsteen or Paul Robeson, and he would say, "Listen to the emotion, to the power in the voice. It's magnificent." This philosophy drifted into the music we would play together. Whenever we reached a part of the song he wanted to emphasize, his tempo would fluctuate wildly, and and he would become teasingly frustrated with me when I failed to keep up. "You have to slow down here," he would shout with a smile. "It needs schmaltz. You can't play it too fast." In one of his favorite songs, My Way, when we came to the final stanza, he would slow down to emphasize it without fail. A little while ago, I was listening to the song, and I was taken by the weight of the lyrics in that stanza, the lyrics which always struck him so deeply. So I'll just end by sharing that with you now. "For what is a man? What has he got? If not himself, then he has not. To say the things he truly feels, and not the words of one who kneels. The record shows I took the blows and did it my way."
Thank you so much for those very moving tributes. We're here this morning to honor the life of Harry Schachter, Tzvi, his Hebrew name Tzvi ben Asher Zelig, and to escort him on his final journey in this world. We're currently reading in shul in the synagogue the Sedras, the Torah portions about Sarat, which is translated as leprosy, some kind of spiritual ailment, not leprosy as we know it today. And we're told that someone who had Sarat would go to Aharon HaKohen, would go to Aaron the high priest, or one of the other Kohanim, one of the other priests. And what would happen is that person with the Sarat would either be declared contaminated or would be quarantined for up to 2 weeks. But the question is, why does the pasuk, why does the verse in the Torah specify Aharon, Aaron? The Torah should just say, the someone with Sarat should go to a Kohen. Why is Aaron's name explicitly mentioned? Our sages, our rabbis explain that Aharon, the Aaron, epitomized the love of people and the pursuit of peace. When he knew of a quarreling family or quarreling friends, he used to work tirelessly to reconcile them. At times, it would be necessary to conceal information or even deviate somewhat from the truth. He would tell quarreling friends that the other one deeply regretted what they did and they have a sincere desire to renew their friendship. Sarat, the rabbis tell us, the Talmud tell us, was caused by what? By Lashon Hara, by negative speech. And sometimes a talebearer justifies their actions, claiming they're actually doing the right thing because they're motivated out of love, out of concern. And therefore, for this reason, we are told that the Torah tells us that someone with Sarat has to go to Aaron. Someone who spoke Lashon Hara, who spoke negatively, has to go to Aharon, to Aaron the high priest, to learn the lesson that the greatest ever lover of peace, did not accomplish it through Lashon Hara, but by always being pleasant to other people. Harry Schachter, like Aaron the high priest, like Aaron HaKohen, was truly loved by everyone who he came into contact with, because when he spoke, when words came out of his mouth, You could sense his humility. You could sense his integrity. And you knew that he truly cared about you. That's why people were so loyal to him. That's why he had such an incredible name. That's why he was so respected, not just professionally, but personally too. And having such a person in our lives is truly a tremendous blessing. And what makes this even more remarkable is that Harry maintained this outlook throughout his life, even though he had to flee Europe as a young boy. I should also mention that Harry will be remembered for simply being exceptional. Exceptional in everything that he did. Whatever he did it well, he excelled at. If he did something, he gave his all. Because Harry was such an incredible individual who had such an impact, such a huge impact on others, his loss is felt by so many people. But of course, most of all, it is felt by his family. And so at this time, we think of his wife of 65 years, Judy. And we think of his children, Aviva and Paul, and Asher and Leora. And we think of his grandchildren, Adam, Noah, Sarah and Audrey. I conclude by saying, Tehei nishmato, b'tzra tzra chayim. May the precious soul, may his soul, the soul of Harry Schachter, the soul of Zvi ben Asher Zelig, be bound up in the bond of eternal life. Amen. Please rise. I'll recite Tehillim Kuf Chaf Aleph, Psalm chapter 121. Shir Amalot Esa'anai Heharim Me'ayin Yavo Ezri Ezri Me'im Adonai Oseh Shamayim V'aretz Al Yitzei Namos Reglecha Al Yanim Shomrecha Hinei Lo Yadim Belo Yishan Shomei Yisrael Adonai Shomrecha Adonai Tzilcha Liyad Yiminecha Yumam HaShemesh De'akeka V'yareach B'layla Adonai Yishmocha mi'kol ra, Yishmo et nafshecha, Adonai Yishmo etcha uvarecha me'atza, v'ad olam. Please remain standing until the family is exited, and please listen carefully to the instructions you will now be given.
Excuse me, ladies and gentlemen, if I got your attention for a moment. For those of you joining a procession to Mount Sinai Memorial Park, we ask that you turn on your high beam headlights and your four-way flashing hazards to identify yourselves as part of the procession. We have the benefit of police to assist us on exiting the parking lot only. When you approach an unsupervised intersection, we ask that you obey all traffic lights and regulations. For your safety, an additional Benjamin's vehicle identified by a purple light will be positioned midway through the procession. Do not drive past this vehicle, but remain in line behind it. Everyone is invited to tune their radio to 96.5 FM for further instruction. If you will kindly exit the rear door of the chapel, they will bring you directly to your car in the parking lot. Thank you.